Have you ever paused to question why certain desires seem to hold power over you, even when you try your hardest to ignore them? Why simple images, words, or fleeting moments tied to sexuality stir something so deep and uncontrollable within you? This is not random. This is the hidden architecture of your mind. Carl Jung, one of the great explorers of the human psyche, believed there is an entire universe inside you, a universe you often refuse to acknowledge. He called it the unconscious, a vast space where forces live and operate far beyond your conscious control. And among the most powerful of these forces is the sexual instinct. But for Jung, sexuality was never just about physical attraction or biological survival. He saw it as a symbolic current charged with immense psychic energy, revealing parts of yourself that have been buried, rejected, or hidden behind the masks you wear to fit into society. What if I told you that behind many of your everyday thoughts, decisions, fears, and impulses, there's a hidden current you've tried to deny, but that never stops shaping your life? If you already feel a spark of curiosity, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe and stay connected, because here we explore not the superficial, but the layers most people only dare to whisper about. Now that you understand sexuality's power over the mind, let's dive deeper into what Jung discovered about this silent influence, and more importantly, what aspects of yourself you might still be avoiding. As Jung ventured into the depths of the human mind, he stumbled upon a reality that unsettled the illusions of human rationality. We like to think of ourselves as logical creatures, making thoughtful decisions based on reason. But in truth, much of our behavior is governed by hidden layers, invisible forces, pulling strings behind the curtain. And among these hidden energies, none is more potent than the sexual drive. Yet, here lies a truth that few dare to face. Sexual energy is not confined to physical desire. It seeps into every corner of life. It influences the way you dress, the way you speak, the way you move through social hierarchies. It inspires glances, fuels ambitions, sparks creativity, and ignites rivalries. For Jung, sexual energy was merely a fragment of a far greater life force he called the libido, the vital psychic energy that moves everything within you. And what happens when that primal energy is repressed, denied, or ignored? It doesn't vanish, it transforms, it hides. It leaks out in ways you don't expect, through obsessions, compulsions, chronic anxiety, even bursts of unexplained aggression. What you try to suppress externally turns into internal conflict. You become a prisoner of the very force you pretend doesn't exist. You may not even realize it, but symbols of sexuality permeate every corner of society, in art, in advertising, even in casual language. This is no accident. According to Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, humanity shares certain archetypal images and ideas that carry deep psychological meaning. Symbols like the serpent, fire, and flowing water often represent sexuality because they touch something deeper than words, something primal, something instinctive, something universal. And yet, despite its omnipresence, sexuality remains one of the most misunderstood forces in our lives. Jung did not see sexual energy as shameful or sinful. He saw it as sacred, a doorway into a symbolic language that, if decoded, could reveal your hidden fears, buried fantasies, and deepest longings. But here's the catch. Instead of integrating this energy, most people choose repression. They deny their feelings, suppress their desires, and continue living a diminished version of themselves. A life amputated from one of its most vital sources of vitality. Jung called this buried reservoir the shadow, the collection of everything you reject, suppress, or disown within yourself. And sexuality, more than almost anything else, is often exiled into this shadow, not because it is evil, but because society teaches that it must be controlled, hidden, disguised. Yet, paradoxically, the more you push it away, the stronger it becomes. And the stronger it becomes, the more it acts on your life from the shadows, influencing your thoughts, your choices, and your relationships without you even realizing it. This is the hidden battlefield within you, the mind at war with the body, instincts turned into enemies, desires morphing into compulsions, and the cost is enormous. Shallow relationships, chronic dissatisfaction, a lingering sense that something essential is missing, something you can never quite name. But here's the good news: you don't have to keep running. You don't have to keep pretending. There is a way to meet this energy maturely, to reclaim its power without being dominated by it. It begins with understanding. It begins with seeing sexuality not as a force to be feared, but as a force to be integrated. Because when you stop fighting this energy and start working with it, it becomes a source of truth, growth, and emotional depth. But to truly transform your relationship with sexual energy, you must also understand the inner archetypes that live within you, forces that quietly shape your desires, your attractions, your fears, and your identity, especially two of them, which Jung believed are at the very heart of your emotional and sexual life. Within Jung's framework of the psyche, there are universal inner figures that influence every human being, regardless of time, culture, or upbringing. He called them archetypes, fundamental blueprints of the human mind that shape how we experience ourselves and the world. Among these two archetypes play a decisive role in your emotional and sexual life: the anima and the animus. They are not merely ideas or intellectual concepts. They are living presences inside each of us, acting as bridges between our conscious selves and the depths of our unconscious. The anima is the feminine image within the unconscious of a man. The animus is the masculine image within the unconscious of a woman. But Jung made it clear, these figures are not limited to biological gender or sexual orientation. They represent inner qualities, sensitivity, intuition, reason, strength, aspects of our own nature that have been repressed, overlooked, or projected outward onto others. This explains why we often fall so powerfully in love with someone who seems to complete us. In reality, we are not merely falling for the other person. We are falling for a part of ourselves that we have long forgotten. However, there is a danger in this unconscious projection. By idealizing the other person, we fail to see them for who they truly are. We don't fall in love with their reality. We fall in love with our own unconscious image. This creates inevitable disillusionment when the illusion inevitably starts to unravel, as it always does. We feel betrayed, disappointed, or even enraged. But the truth is, we were deceiving ourselves all along. Sexual energy often acts as the emotional glue that binds these projections together. It creates a sense of wholeness, an intense fusion that feels almost transcendent. But beneath it, what we are really seeking is not another person. It is a reunion with our own lost parts. In this sense, sex transcends the purely physical. It becomes a symbolic attempt, albeit unconscious, to heal the inner fragmentation within us. Yet the tragedy is that many never realize this. They spend their lives seeking externally what can only be found internally. They enter relationship after relationship, hoping to finally feel complete, only to encounter the same emptiness once the initial euphoria fades. This is why Jung insisted true emotional and sexual maturation demands more than falling in love. It requires seeing through the projections. It requires the difficult but liberating work of retrieving what we have cast onto others, of reintegrating the lost parts of ourselves. This process is known as individuation, the path of becoming a whole, integrated individual. It is not an easy path. It demands pain, confrontation, transformation, but it offers a reward far greater than fleeting pleasure. It offers true consciousness, true love. When you begin to recognize the anima or animus within you, something profound shifts. You no longer feel an endless sense of lack. You are no longer a slave to idealizations. You no longer mistake blind desire for real connection. Love transforms from an unconscious search for wholeness into a conscious act of sharing your fullness. At this level, sex also changes. It ceases to be a desperate attempt to fill a void and becomes a conscious meeting of two presences, an intimate dance between two people who are rooted in themselves and open to each other. But reaching this place doesn't happen just by reading books or reflecting intellectually. It requires practice. It requires vigilance. It requires courage. The courage to confront your own shadow, to accept your desires without shame, to embrace your own complexity. And this is exactly where many people falter. They want the rewards of love, but not the work of self-knowledge. They seek balance without daring to plunge into their own chaos. They long for intimacy, but fear the vulnerability it demands. Because before you can integrate what is luminous within you, you must confront what has been buried. You must face the raw, untamed forces that dwell within the depths of your being. Among these forces, none is more feared and more misunderstood than the primal sexual instinct. This is the instinct that awakens forbidden fantasies, compulsive behaviors, and unspoken fears. It is the instinct that society has spent centuries trying to tame, control, and suppress. But Jung discovered something few dared to admit. This wild instinct, though often hidden under layers of culture and morality, never truly disappears. It remains alive, breathing beneath the surface, finding ways to express itself through symbols, dreams, compulsions, and unexplained behaviors. And when this instinct is denied or repressed, it does not become harmless, it becomes distorted. Break. Time equals 3 south. When the sexual instinct is ignored, it does not vanish, it mutates. It manifests through compulsions, addictions, distorted fantasies, and emotional patterns that seem to sabotage relationships without any clear explanation. The more you attempt to repress it, the more it twists itself into shadows that haunt you silently. But here is what Jung understood clearly. This primal instinct is not something to fear. It is not an enemy to be eliminated. It is a natural, vital force, one that needs to be acknowledged, understood, and consciously integrated. The problem is not the instinct itself. The problem is the shame, guilt, and fear layered upon it by centuries of moral and cultural repression. From childhood, many are taught that pleasure is sinful, that desire is dangerous, that their own bodies are sources of shame. And so, the mind turns against itself. The body becomes an enemy. The unconscious festers, seeking ways to speak through symptoms, compulsions, and emotional chaos. Many people believe they are struggling with relationship issues, when in fact, they are grappling with a disowned part of themselves. They believe they have bad luck in love, when in truth, they are trapped in unconscious patterns, born from unresolved inner conflicts. You end up repeating the same relationship dynamics. You are drawn to the same types of people you experience, the same heartbreaks, because you're unconsciously trying to heal an inner wound through external means. But true healing doesn't happen outside. It begins within. Depth psychology offers a radical invitation. Stop running, start listening. Every impulse carries a message. Every desire hides a story. Every fantasy points toward a part of yourself that longs to be seen, understood, and integrated. The work is not about eradicating these impulses. It is about decoding them. It's not about repression or indulgence. It's about emotional maturity. Real freedom is not about doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Real freedom is about knowing yourself so deeply that you can choose consciously rather than being enslaved by unconscious forces. And this journey begins with a single courageous question. What is my desire trying to reveal to me? Not the superficial answer, not the convenient rationalization, but the deeper truth, the one that challenges you, the one that forces you to confront old beliefs, hidden fears, and the deepest needs of your soul. When Jung spoke about the symbolic power of sexuality, he was not reducing sex to mere biology or impulse. He was pointing toward an inner journey, one where desire serves as a doorway to self-discovery. Desire is the threshold. What lies beyond it is vast, profound, and transformative. There, beyond the surface-level cravings, you encounter your deepest insecurities, your secret hopes, your unclaimed power. When you stop treating your desires as enemies and start seeing them as inner guides, everything begins to change. Sex, at its core, speaks less about the body and more about the soul. It reveals how you approach power, vulnerability, affection, and connection. And it is precisely in this vulnerable territory that the portal to transcendence opens. Because when you stop fleeing from your own depths, you find the thread that leads not just to fleeting pleasure, but to lasting transformation at this point. Sexuality is no longer a separate, isolated part of life. It becomes a sacred bridge between instinct and spirit. It becomes a symbolic act where the unconscious meets the conscious, where the individual self touches the archetypal forces that shape all life. Sex, when understood at this level, becomes a means, not an end, a tool for self-awareness, connection, and even spiritual evolution. But this shift doesn't happen automatically. It demands inner work, real, raw, and courageous. It demands that you confront the contradictions within you, the part of you that craves pleasure, and the part that fears it, the part that longs for intimacy, and the part that is terrified of surrendering. These inner tensions are not obstacles. They are doorways. It is in navigating the space between these polarities that transformation occurs. When you accept that desire does not make you weak but human, when you embrace the paradox, that authentic spirituality includes the body, you begin to transform your relationship with sexuality. Desire becomes a bridge, not a prison. You no longer feel enslaved by it. You walk alongside it with awareness and purpose, and as you integrate your sexual energy, something remarkable happens. Your relationships change too. Before integration, desire is hunger, a desperate attempt to fill an inner void. After integration, desire becomes a presence, a fullness. You share rather than a lack you seek to fill. You stop seeking your missing half in others. You realize you are already whole. The people you attract also change. No longer mirrors of your woundedness, they become companions on your path. Sex, too, evolves. It ceases to be just a physical act or an emotional escape. It becomes an act of total presence, a communion between two conscious beings who meet, not from lack, but from abundance. Of course, this path is not about perfection. You will still feel fear, you will still face insecurity, but you will no longer be ruled by them. You will learn to sit with them, to listen to them, to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. You will recognize the archetypes at play not just in your fantasies, but in your relationships, your attractions, your emotional patterns, and this awareness will empower you to make different choices that are aligned with your deepest truth. This journey is not linear. There will be setbacks, there will be moments of doubt, but every step brings you closer to your essence. Every confrontation with your inner world strengthens your ability to love truly, fully, consciously, and that is where sex, once seen as separate from the soul, reveals its true nature as one of the most profound languages of self-expression, self-awareness, and ultimately, transcendence. Break time equals 3 south. At the point where instinct and consciousness meet, a new and deeper challenge arises. How do you maintain balance between your natural desires and the presence of awareness, especially in a world that constantly stimulates excess, superficiality, and disconnection? We live surrounded by exaggeration. Desire is no longer something sacred or private. It's marketed, exploited, and sold to us at every turn. In every image, every advertisement, every scroll on social media, sexuality is used not as a portal to self-understanding, but as a tool for consumption. What once was intimate has become spectacle. Excitement is marketed like a product. Desire, that ancient and profound energy, is reduced to performance and quick gratification. Jung would see all this not as progress, but as a symptom of profound psychic imbalance. Because when instinct is exploited without consciousness, it fractures. It loses its power to heal and transform. Instead of being a bridge to depth, it becomes a trap that perpetuates emptiness. What looks like freedom is often just another form of slavery. Slavery to constant stimulation, to craving without meaning, to connections without real intimacy. But Jung's vision was never about repression or moralistic judgment. He wasn't advocating for guilt, shame, or denial. His perspective was symbolic and transformative. He believed that true balance is found not in denial, nor in blind indulgence, but in the capacity to hold the tension between opposites. On one side, your genuine desire, On the other, the clear gaze of consciousness. Between them, a silent place of wisdom where instinct and soul can meet without domination, without shame, without disintegration. This middle space only opens when you begin to listen beyond the noise, when you are no longer satisfied with surface-level pleasure, when you start asking yourself deeper questions. Am I seeking pleasure or true connection? Am I chasing validation or experiencing real intimacy? Is this an escape from myself or a journey back home? These questions shift everything. They change not just what you desire, but how you desire. They change the quality of your relationships and the quality of your own presence in your life. Modern society will not encourage this kind of depth. It profits from your disconnection. It thrives on your constant hunger. It teaches you to consume, not to listen. That's why inner work is more crucial than ever. It is an act of rebellion, an act of healing, an act of returning to your true self. When you start cultivating inner silence, self-reflection, and conscious presence, you stop being a pawn of external stimuli. You begin to experience sexuality not as another product to be consumed, but as an integral part of your human wholeness. In this space, sexuality is no longer guilt-ridden or compulsive. It becomes sacred, not in a religious sense, but in the sense that it becomes meaningful, integrated, luminous. It becomes a dance between earth and sky, a fusion of body and soul, a language of presence, truth, surrender, and connection. And this level of intimacy, both with yourself and with another, cannot be taught by external manuals, videos, or societal norms. It is learned through inner listening, through courage, through the radical willingness to dive deep into your own unconscious. This is how desire transforms. It stops being a chain. It becomes a path, not something you must fight against, nor something you blindly obey, something you consciously integrate into your being. This transformation allows you to live with intensity, but without losing yourself, to love deeply, but without merging destructively with another, to desire truthfully, but without annihilating your autonomy. And as this inner shift takes root, a new understanding of sexuality emerges. Sex is not a final destination. It is a sacred means, a profound language through which the soul expresses itself. In this integrated state, you no longer seek frantic gratification. You seek presence. You seek real connection. You seek communion between two beings who are fully awake to themselves and to each other. The tension between desire and consciousness doesn't vanish. It becomes alive, dynamic, creative. It becomes a source of vitality, not conflict. And then, a final beautiful question naturally arises. What is the true role of sex in the journey of self-discovery? The deeper you go into this path, the clearer it becomes. Sex was never just about pleasure. It was never merely a biological function. It was always a mirror of your inner world, your shadows, your longings, your forgotten parts. It was always a call to wholeness. When you stop treating sexuality as a battlefield between repression and indulgence, when you start honoring it as a sacred symbolic force, your relationship with yourself and with others is transformed. Forever, attraction, infatuation, desire, they are no longer confusing storms. They become signs, maps leading you back to parts of yourself you abandoned long ago. You realize that the people who stir your deepest passions are not just random encounters. They are mirrors, revealing what is still unhealed, still unloved within you. You realize that love, sexuality, and connection are not goals to achieve. They are invitations to integrate, and this is Jung's great gift to us. The understanding that every desire, every longing, every impulse is a message, an invitation to become whole. The path is not easy. It demands honesty, patience, and immense courage. It asks you to sit with discomfort, to befriend your shadows, to choose presence over anesthesia. But the reward is priceless, because when you walk this path, you don't just transform your relationship with sexuality. You transform your relationship with life itself. Desire stops being a haunting hunger. It becomes a compass pointing you home. And in that homecoming, you discover the deepest truth. You were never broken. You were never missing anything. You only needed to remember. So the next time desire rises within you, don't run, don't suppress, don't escape. Pause, listen, ask yourself, what is this desire trying to reveal to me? Because following that thread may lead you not just to another, but back to the part of yourself you were always meant to find. Asterisk.